Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Smart Growth Subcabinet Public Forum. I'm Wendy Peters, and I serve as the chair of the Smart Growth Subcabinet, and I'm pleased to be joined by my colleagues from each of the agencies that comprise the subcabinet. And as always, I'm very grateful for their work and their collaboration. Many of you have been with us for these subcabinet forums that we've now been holding virtually. And wanted just a few quick housekeeping items with regard to GoToWebinar. If you have a question, certainly you can submit it by using the questions tool. After each presentation, we'll have a short Q&A. And after all four, we will open up into the county and municipal public forum. Please submit your questions or comments using the questions tool on the control bar. We've been doing this for a while, so I'm sure you all are very familiar with it as well. Before we get started, we always like to start with a couple quick little poll questions. We have the first question is, where are you located? If you could please participate with us, we'd appreciate it. So the poll question, where are you located? Your choice, Central Maryland, Capital, Upper or Lower Eastern Shore, Southern Maryland, and Western Maryland. And do we have our responses in, Chuck?
They're still coming in. We're almost there, and just give us just a couple more seconds and we should have a final vote for our account for you. So it looks like we have 50% from Central Maryland. We have 18% from the Upper and Lower Eastern Shore, 16% from Southern Maryland, 9% from Western Maryland, and 7% from the Capital Region.
Great, great. Thank you for your response on that. Our second poll question, we want to have a better understanding of who our attendees are as we continue to kind of mold these to be helpful as far as content. So which of the following best describes your role when it comes to smart and sustainable growth? Elected official, local planning department, state agency official, private and nonprofit organization, or general public?
Just give a couple more seconds for folks to finish polling. We will have our final tallies. Okay, we have 36% from local planning departments, 29% from state agencies, 16% from the general public, 14% from private and nonprofit organizations, and 5 elected officials. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you all very much, and thank you, Chuck, for that information. So under Governor Hogan's leadership, we've been more accessible and responsive to our citizens and our local governments in all parts of our state. We've been committed to working together to preserve our abundant environmental assets while really providing the resources to support a strong economy. As part of that commitment, in 2017, Governor Hogan signed an executive order directing the creation of a new state development plan. And I think that Chuck and John are trying to catch up with us. Are we able to get back into present mode?
Sorry about that. Our polling got me off of display, so sorry about that.
No problem. Even just goes to show, no matter how many times you do this.
I got to switch screen again. Sorry about that.
So again, I reiterate Governor Hogan's leadership and really his commitment to serving the people and providing the resources for a strong economy. And in 2017, he signed an executive order directing the creation of a new state development plan. And as part of that, he set forth what he wanted to see as components of the plan and the 4 major goals: to enrich the lives of Marylanders, to use the smart growth principles, to grow responsibly, and to protect Maryland's resources. And incorporating strategies for really growing responsibly and protecting Maryland's resources, he laid out a number of objectives, which we followed today and have been for some time: supporting existing communities, creating quality places, coordinating state investment, preserving our natural resources, and really working to preserve our culture, our history, and our heritage. Very grateful for the work that has been done. It followed a very extensive 2-year process with more than 90 meetings with local government officials, planning and economic development staff, and numerous stakeholders across the state. And as a result of all of that, A Better Maryland was crafted. The new state development plan, and affectionately known as A Better Maryland, really charts a clear strategic path to preserve Maryland's natural resources while encouraging responsive growth in our existing communities and providing for future growth and opportunity. And it does this with the understanding that the best planning happens locally, which is far more effective than top-down directives. And we're grateful to be able to have this sharing of information with our local partners as we meet quite regularly. Consistent with Governor Hogan's directive, the plan includes a digital resource center that really provides easy access to a virtual library of plans, programs, and resources. Again, working to connect, working to collaborate, working to provide resources. A Better Maryland presents a broad vision that seeks to effectively unite our state agencies in our work. It addresses some of our most pressing challenges, and it gives community and local leaders the tools to change things for the better. I'm pleased today to be joined by a number of, actually all 13 of the agencies. We have presentations by 4 of my colleagues, and you will hear from those 4 a little bit later, but also very pleased to be joined by Assistant Secretary Jim Repkowski from Labor, Director Higgs from State Department of Assessments and Taxation, and we'll be hearing from Secretary McCord, Secretary Hadaway-Riccio, Secretary Bartenfelder, and Director Mary Tung from the Maryland Energy Administration. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Secretary McCord of the Department of Planning.
There you go, coming in. Can you hear me, John? We got it?
You're good.
There we go. Thank you very much. Thank you, Special Secretary Peters. I'm appreciating this opportunity to talk about what the Planning Department's been doing to implement A Better Maryland. It's been working hard to make sure all of the resources are made available to all the local governments across the state. And it fills our mission. The agency's mission is to help Maryland's counties and municipalities in land use and resource planning and provide review and technical assistance on a variety of planning topics. In addition, we offer data analysis, research assistance, and policy development implementation to support local governments as well as communities and businesses and other organizations. A Better Maryland is a stage where many of these efforts and those of the sister state agencies are presented for our local partners to reference as they carry out their duties assisting Maryland's communities. So let me see here. We've got the, there you go, get the presentation better than my face. So in accordance with the State Finance and Procurement article, the Planning Department is charged with preparing the State Development Plan. And the language there is to promote the general welfare and prosperity of the people of the state through coordinated development of the state. So the preparation of the State Development Plan, A Better Maryland, was a collaborative effort of state agencies, local governments, and concerned citizens. While A Better Maryland includes the typical goals, objectives, and strategies, the plan through a bettermaryland.gov website continues to become more responsive to the statewide issues identified in the plan. As state agencies implement the plan and resources, all the programs and tools are developed, they're added to A Better Maryland's website. Based on the website usage, we are progressively seeing more users monthly visit the website, and the time they're devoting to exploring the web pages continues to grow more and more, as you can see in the next slide. The number of users visiting A Better Maryland website, the blue line on the chart, has gradually increased since the site went live in August of 2019, averaging about 150 monthly users for the first year, moving up around 175 in the second year, and now reaching close to 200 users monthly. The red line is the number of monthly page views. It appears there's been a significant increase in page views by users to the website over the past year. We believe this can be attributed to the added content from state agency partners linked to the site. So the 3 C's: coming out of COVID, looking for new census information, and then looking towards having to do comprehensive plans as a piece of that explanation for the increase in travel to the site, which we welcome. Planning staff continues working with the state agency partners to identify and add resources that further the strategies identified in A Better Maryland. There's more than 100 resources posted on A Better Maryland website, and we're going to highlight about 15 of those resources. They come from about 19 different state agencies, commissions, and organizations, and we've developed about 11 of them that are posted on the website, and 4 are under development. So we will tell you the things that we're about to do and under development, in addition to the things that you can see right now. So our first one is the way the plan is set up. They're associated with the 10 topics and associated strategies that are in A Better Maryland. These topics are grouped under those associated with environment, economic development, and community development. So we're going to look at the resources associated with the first 3 environment-related topics. There's 5 environment-related resources that planning has developed to implement the state development plan. The 2022 water resources element guidance update, Maryland's plan to adapt to saltwater intrusion and salinization, Maryland growth and conservation analysis tool, the statewide land use map, that's a new initiative that's underway, and then Maryland protected lands dashboard. So we'll touch on each of those real quickly. So we've worked with MDE to prepare an updated water resource element guide website for use by local governments that need to update their mandated water resources element in their comprehensive plan. This updated guidance provides new information on flooding and climate change that should be considered when updating the water resource element. It's also included updated data resources. So planning and MDE are having regular outreach meetings and training to local governments and interested groups to make sure that that water resources element is relevant and timely and contains the best information we can make available. And planning's completed the legislatively mandated plan to adapt to saltwater intrusion and salinization in December of 2019. As noted in the plan, Maryland already is impacted by saltwater intrusion and salinization. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of research in Maryland on the problem. We have been speaking to the Harry Hughes Center for Research Advisory Council about the research that's needed for saltwater intrusion. Some of those topics that we discussed there within the past couple of weeks were public education and outreach on climate change impacts to freshwater aquifers and communicating the seriousness of that issue, looking at how other people have addressed the saltwater intrusion as land becomes less productive and is converted to other uses, research involving use of easements and other land use mechanisms to address saltwater intrusion, and then education outreach to let the public know there are opportunities for federal and state grants in this area. So that's one of the things that the water resources element will include. And then we go to the environment, the Maryland Growth and Conservation Analysis tool that was developed by planning in coordination with DBM's Office of Capital Budgeting. That informs state agencies that are preparing new capital projects on issues that should be considered during the project scope development process. By clicking on the location of a proposed project in the Growth and Conservation Mapping tool, that informs the user whether the project is in a state priority growth area and whether there are environmental or cultural resources that need to be addressed. The Growth and Conservation Mapping tool has been recently improved to include the Climate Ready Action Boundary, the CRAB layer, Climate Ready Action Boundary, an indicator of potential coastal flooding, which the capital project preparer should factor in developing the project scope of work. And then the table on the left side illustrates the information reported when you click on the property using a mapping tool. So those are the kind of things that you'll see when you click onto the property. Then Planning's Geospatial Data Analysis Unit is updating the old 2010 land cover map and enhancing the GIS methodology to create a new 2020 statewide land use map. Since the Chesapeake Conservancy provides a watershed-wide 1-meter resolution land cover mapping resource, Planning has focused its mapping GIS efforts to prepare a more accurate land use map rather than replicate much of the work of the Conservancy. The Chesapeake Conservancy land cover data will remain available to state and local users, but the 2020 land use map that Planning will provide local governments is a useful resource on existing land use activity, which can be used to compare land use changes over time and used as the local level in preparing future comprehensive plans. So as comes the census, then comes the comprehensive plans, and we're trying to put the tools in the hands of local governments to help them make the best use of it. And this map illustrates the detailed information that local planners will be able to use in describing the existing land use pattern in their community, which is the first step in determining what you want your community to be in the future. And then we have the environment implementation efforts, the Protected Lands Dashboard. So working with DNR, Planning has developed a Protected Lands Dashboard to report on land preservation efforts statewide. So updated quarterly, this dashboard has become the consensus statewide reference of land preservation acreage for state agencies, local governments, and interest groups alike. So the dashboard reports, the next slide there, John. The dashboard reports on land preservation by funding category, by county, and the statewide effort to reach the land preservation goal of 1,030,000 acres, which as of March 31st, 2022, we've reached 83% of that goal. So this dashboard helps us to keep track of the preservation efforts all across the state, and it's available for everyone. The next topics involve economic development. So those 4 economic development topics will go. The first one, those topics, the Brownfields Redevelopment Assistance Program, Reinvest Maryland website and toolkit, transportation tools, and the last large element there, the statewide building permit reporting system, a new initiative. The transportation tools, those 4 tools and the subset, we'll talk about them as we go along here. So the Brownfields Redevelopment Assistance is the work of the Planning's Resource Conservation and Management Unit. They started working on that in 2020. Planning staff provides local jurisdictions assistance in applying for grants to remediate brownfields in their community. Just an example, Planning applied for and received EPA funding to assist Baltimore County to offer phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessments, and those services to property owners on the county's southeast side there in Baltimore County. So in 2021, Planning held Maryland's inaugural statewide Brownfield Conference and is working on another training session this year, as well as hosting webinars on the subject. Planning is continuing to enhance the array of technical assistance provided to local governments. If your community is interested in learning more about how to address brownfield site in your community, please contact or go to Planning's Brownfield Redevelopment Assistance webpage for all the contact information you need. We'll be happy to help. The brownfields is an important process. The City of Frederick, in addition to the Department of Planning, both received EPA grants, and we're both trying to make the most use of that to get people to bring these areas back to life. So it's very important. Reinvest Maryland 2.0 was launched before A Better Maryland, but now we continue to enhance this resource also. The website now has a story map of 27 case studies on how state resources were used to redevelop and revitalize different parts of the state. The website also includes a toolbox listing state and federal programs that may be of use in addressing your community's economic development challenges. The list is searchable, can be filtered, and you can focus on the most relevant programs and services. There are 4 noteworthy transportation tools that Planning has developed to assist local governments, land developers, and interest groups. These are Snapshot Maryland Transportation Planning Dashboard, transit station area profile tool, planning tools for transit-oriented development, and transportation element checklist and technical assistance. So Snapshot Maryland Transportation Planning Dashboard is one in a series of geospatial dashboards that and interactive mapping tools produced by planning that integrate geospatial and tabular data from a variety of state and local sources to address the operational and long-term planning concerns of state agencies and local governments. This one focuses on socioeconomic data related to transportation planning from a general planning perspective for all modes of travel. You can drill down to the lowest level of geography that you want, going from the county to the municipal to the census tract level to the traffic analysis zone level, data and analysis. So this tool will help you get down to the type of geography that you're most interested in. And then the transit station area profile tool is another dashboard tool planning has developed that focuses on socioeconomics and transit ridership information around nearly 130 of Maryland's train and rail stations. The information on this dashboard is geared to answering questions local governments, developers, and interest groups might have about the potential for transit-oriented development within a half-mile radius of the station. So if you want to know what's near one of these stations, this tool will give it to you. So it's being updated and making sure that this was a very popular tool when it first came out. We're trying to keep it current for everyone to see what's around the areas where transit-oriented development can go. So planning tools for transit-oriented development is a series of websites that planning has been developed to promote TOD development around Maryland's rail stations. Planning has collected information on local TOD policies and programs for users in one place, along with examples of how TOD has been successful in Maryland. Now the economic development implementation efforts. So finally, our last transportation resource posted on A Better Maryland is a transportation element checklist that lists a wide range of data sources at the state and federal level for local planners to use when updating their comprehensive plans and transportation element. This checklist includes hyperlinks to facilitate easy access to the data. So this puts it kind of in one place. Go down the checklist, look at the hyperlink, and get further information. You'll be able to make sure that your plan is considering the right kind of things when you put it together. The statewide building permit reporting system is our newest initiative to collect building permit data from all 24 counties and the larger municipalities in Maryland, and to display that information on a dashboard and interactive map. To date, we've contacted 23 jurisdictions and are working through the process of developing a common data set to be displayed. We believe there will be great utility in analyzing statewide building permit data for economic development purposes, as well as a valuable input for data for transportation, school, housing, and planning efforts at state and local level. The school is very important. That's an important aid to school enrollment projections at the state, but more importantly, at the local level. So the way that the state of Maryland does its school enrollment projections may vary with each jurisdiction, but we both need to get as good as we can at predicting where the children will end up, at what level, and what schools. And that issue, as I serve on the IAC, the Interagency Commission on School Construction, which used to give out about $350 million, and now it's getting close to like $2 to $3 billion worth of school construction funding. We need to know where that enrollment is going to occur, where the enrollment spikes are going to be, and what's going to happen. We've talked to demographers about the effects of the pandemic and how there may be a slight baby bust, and then when the baby bust starts bottoming out and coming back up again, where are we going to have the pressures to make sure that we have the seats in the classrooms to accommodate the children once we fully recover from the effect of the pandemic. So it's very important for school construction, among other things. So it's a very, very exciting project. It's a new initiative that we need to make sure that we are making sure that everybody is cooperating to make sure that that initiative gets off the ground very well. So we can move on to community development topics. Those community development topics include implementation efforts here, the Maryland Info Portal, the Housing Element Models and Guidelines website, the Maryland Historic Revitalization Tax Credit Program, MEDUSA, the Cultural Resource Information System, and compatible use and development with military installations, That website and handbook is underway, and Maryland's new growth model toolkit, that's a new initiative underway also. So individually, the Maryland info portal, that's been around for years, formerly known as the Red Book. In recent years, the web resource has been updated, includes search features to aid in finding financial and non-financial assistance that local governments and interest groups might want to address when they're dealing with their local concerns. It's an extremely helpful tool when getting started and not knowing what possible resource might be available to address a local problem. We encourage people to explore this resource further. Let us know how we might be able to improve the user experience for all the grants and information available out there on Maryland's info portal. Planning community development efforts. One of planning's newest websites that comprehensively looks at the issue of housing is the Housing Element Models and Guidelines website. This site includes a housing data dashboard that provides local planners housing affordability data specific to their community. It is a self-assessment tool that a local planner can use to evaluate what impediments to affordable housing with local plans and regulations. It also includes a number of best planning practices and case studies for planners to consider as they update their comprehensive plans. This Housing Element Models and Guidelines website is taking the old concept of models and guidelines that the Department of Planning has been doing for many decades and bringing it into this century to make sure we can give you links to current information to help you figure out the best way to solve the problem of affordable housing in your jurisdiction. And then planning community development implementation efforts. We have the Maryland Historic Revitalization Tax Credit Program, one of planning's oldest yet one of the most impactful economic and community development resources is MHT's Historic Revitalization Tax Credit Program. It's a program that for many years has been about $10 million worth of funding available. Now that programming by law has been increased to $20 million. So $20 million for MHT's Historic Revitalization Tax Credit Program. That program is targeted for homeowners. They have programs for small commercial and larger competitive commercial projects. Visit MHT's website for information on all of their tax credit programs and another tool in the toolbox into bringing older communities back online and to preserving these historic resources in your area is consideration of the competitive commercial tax credit and the other tax credit that the tax credits available through the Maryland Historical Trust. Planning's community development efforts. Now MHT has integrated GIS into its archive of historical records to make the information more accessible to historic preservation planners and others interested in historic preservation. If you're interested in learning about historic resources around your community, just visit MHT's Medusa website. You check Medusa to know what historic or cultural resources may be, where they're located, and compare that to where you want your next project to go. Or if you know a project that wants to locate it in a certain area, go to Medusa first and see about the cultural resources that are in that area. It's click and discover before anybody puts a shovel in the ground. It's a much easier way to figure out if this is the direction that you want to go with the next project in your area, and make sure that you're not disturbing historic and cultural resources. So the next, we have planning community development implementation efforts. In collaboration with the Department of Commerce, planning has been developing compatible use development with military installations website and handbook for the past 2 years. The first phase of this project should be complete in the next couple of months, and the website available to the public and Maryland's military facilities. The purpose of this website and handbook is to improve the understanding and coordination between Maryland's military facilities and their adjacent communities. Maryland's 20 military facilities, 12 major installations, have an estimated $55.5 billion impact on the state's economy, on the economy. These facilities are the neighbor next door, and they have and will continue to be our community partners. The website is intended to improve the working relationship between the base and the community, strengthen our bond with the major economic development institutions throughout Maryland, because each one of these military installations is itself a center of innovation. And we're trying to make sure that we can have these places grow and thrive together with their existing civilian communities. That's the goal here. Beyond any one particular base commander who may be there 2 to 3 years, and any local government who would go 2 to 4, maybe 8 years worth of the same administration, we want to make sure that the base and the community that surrounds the base, defense communities and local communities, are growing and thriving together, and that the planning efforts don't conflict and bring projects that will make the base less viable and make the base more vulnerable to a base reduction and closure process. So this entire compatible use project is a major undertaking. We are thankful to our friends at Commerce for helping us get it off the ground, and we're trying to make sure that every community will be able to have really good resources for thinking how they will grow together with the installation in their area. So very important project. Planning community development implementation efforts. We've had a long tradition in providing valuable socioeconomic and land use data to state agencies and local governments. The department's development capacity and growth modeling work has served as a critical data factor in the Chesapeake Bay watershed restoration efforts. Planning in recent years has tried to expand the utility of our growth model toolkit to offer local governments data and other resources that they can use to plan their communities. Planning is working with local partners to collect land use and zoning information, and applying our GIS skills to prepare a series of interacting mapping tools that can be used by planners to update their comprehensive plans and address the challenging community development problems that they are facing. So the growth model is an important process that we're underway. This initiative is really important to try to understand how the state will look in the future, and the growth model toolkit is a very important project here at planning. The graphic that you see now illustrates the relationship of the data and analysis tools being developed by the department. You'll see there's a number of foundational data resources the department maintains that provide the building blocks for the second tier of analysis the department is also working on, and the third tier that are predictive tools that the department intends to develop to assist local governments planning for their communities. So we're trying to put all the resources of the State Department of Planning at the disposal of every local planning department, every municipality, every county planning department, to make sure that we all have the same best data available to work from, to make sure we're planning the best future for Maryland. So in closing, I hope you visit a Better Maryland's website, explore the many resources that the Department of Planning and our sister agencies have developed, and implement the strategies identified in our State Development Plan, A Better Maryland. Should you have any questions, you can contact Chuck Boyd or Joe Griffiths. Most of you know Chuck and Joe. Chuck Boyd or Joe Griffiths for more information or assistance. And you can always send me an email. I'll direct you to the right people and get somebody to get back to you. So I appreciate your attention and looking forward to making the Better Maryland website the kind of website that we can continue to count on people coming to make sure they understand what's going on at the state level, best practices, and they can plan for a better future in their communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary McCord. I have received a couple of questions, so I thought maybe we'd try to address a couple of them, and some of them we may have to address in the interest of time offline.
Certainly.
The first question, can the maps that show brownfields be put on a Better Maryland website, on the abetter.maryland.gov website? Can they be included in that?
That's a question that we have to resolve with some of the owners of the data that are on those maps. MD has lots of good data. We have to make sure that we can present it in the same way. So we've looked at that, and we'll continue to look at that.
Then another question, how does the state evaluate the plans made at the county level? In other words, what are the criteria used to evaluate effectiveness of county plans?
How we look at the effectiveness of county plans. We can, one of the, Joe and Chuck, who do that all the time, can tell you, but the most important thing is to see that there's not conflicts between your neighbors, conflicts between what you said before and what you're doing now, and issues that will present further, how do you say, bottlenecks down the road. We review every annexation that happens when the municipality is growing, and then we can start to give our 2 cents to where municipalities are growing towards each other or growing into areas that the county had thought they were going to preserve. So we're trying to avoid conflicts there. And that's part of the evaluation of the plans, includes making sure that we're preventing conflicts and making sure that we point out consistencies and inconsistencies with the prior plans that have been made in that area. And you can check with Chuck Boyd and Joe Griffiths to find out further information for what might be the most common things that we're looking for there for our checklist.
Great. Great. And to the
Secretary
extent
McCord, this check, I'll follow up on, there's a few other questions that are much more detailed. I'll follow up with the inquirer about this, and we'll provide them a more specific request dealing with their specific inquiry.
Great.
Thanks, Chuck. I don't have the questions open now, but that's fine. Thank you,
Great.
Chuck.
Thank you, Secretary McCord. Appreciate the presentation.
No problem, Secretary Peter. Thanks.
As you can tell from Secretary McCord's presentation, I mean, there really is a lot of collaboration among our state agencies. Next, I'd like to introduce Secretary Jeannie Hadaway-Riccio from the Department of Natural Resources.
Hi, well, good afternoon, and thank you, Special Secretary Peters, and thank you to everyone for the opportunity to participate in the forum today and to present on behalf of Maryland Department of Natural Resources. I thought a good place to start, moving to the next slide, would be to just outline some of the high-level goals that the governor has challenged his cabinet members with that specifically apply to us at DNR. Of course, good customer service isn't enough. We want great customer service, but also better coordination with local jurisdictions, working together across departments and agencies, and serving all Marylanders and all of Maryland. And I just have to pause and say that the Smart Growth Subcabinet has been a great platform and collaborative for us being able to achieve these goals, and a Better Maryland plan has really served as a framework for this work as well. We're really proud of the fact that we have been in the top 5 agencies in the state for customer service, and a recent survey of our visitors to our Maryland state parks said that over 90% of them had a great experience. So these are the types of things that we've been working on in terms of customer service. Moving to the next slide, I want to just touch on better coordination with local jurisdictions. One of the first announcements that I made as Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources is that we were going to create a grants gateway, and that would serve as a single point of entry for local jurisdictions and organizations seeking grant funding. So instead of sending everyone to 5 or 6 or more different links on our website, there's one portal for their application. This really streamlined the process and also assisted with smaller jurisdictions that may not have the resources to search and go to a lot of different places. And as you can see, that has been a success because we've funded over 3,000 projects and invested a lot of funding into bay restoration projects, resilience through restoration projects, and also waterway improvements. And these projects that are being funded are very consistent with the topics and strategies of a Better Maryland, including sustaining the environment and ensuring that our communities are resilient. I also can't resist an opportunity to talk about the important programs that we have, like Program Open Space, Community Parks and Playgrounds, and more recently, Local Parks and Playgrounds Infrastructure, all of which has received record investment under the Hogan administration and has allowed us to help and contribute to the land preservation strategy of a Better Maryland. Next slide, please. So along those lines, I wanted to share a couple of sample projects that also highlight how we're coordinating with local jurisdictions and also increasing access for Marylanders to outdoor recreation. starting with Rocky Gap and the desire through A Better Maryland to create economic development opportunities. We wanted to enhance the visitors' experience there, so we have actually partnered with 2 local small and minority-owned businesses to provide bicycle rentals and tours in our parks, as well as food service. We worked with Westminster on a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for them to convert a 187-acre park in the middle of 187-acre golf course in the middle of their jurisdiction to a potential future park. In Baltimore City at Leon Day Park, they were experiencing a lot of stormwater management issues in their sports fields, which are very heavily utilized. So we have been working with them and providing funding through POS to help address those issues and also do some historic preservation there. The Ma and Pa Trail in Harford County is a major outdoor recreation initiative for Harford County that we're proud to partner with them on. In Edmonston, they have been really proactive about putting in fitness stations that are being able to utilize by senior citizens as well as young people to get extra fitness and recreation in their life and create sort of a healthy community there. In Talbot County, we've been proud to work on the Frederick Douglass Park to provide additional interpretation and preservation of the important history there. In Leonardtown, we contributed to their waterfront redevelopment vision by funding the walkway. You can see the Lieutenant Governor and I touring there in the pouring rain, but even in the rain, it was an amazing experience and has really helped to enhance their downtown. And then last but not least, the Pocomoke and Snow Hill Trail, which was just approved by the Maryland General Assembly this last session, will actually connect both of those towns with a trail for the first time ever, providing amazing economic development opportunities. But this is also consistent with the goal and strategy of creating quality places in Maryland as outlined by A Better Maryland. And then going to our last slide. Again, looking at economic development needs of the next century, which is identified in the plan, and improving economic growth, we have really focused on the quickly growing outdoor recreation sector. In September, Governor Hogan announced the formation of Maryland's first Office of Outdoor Recreation. We're one of the first states in the country to lead in this way. And that has provided an awesome opportunity for us to work with Department of Commerce and all of the agencies involved in the Smart Growth Subcabinet on retail, manufacturing, and tourism, and also hosting world-class events in the state of Maryland, such as the Fairhill 5-Star Equestrian event, which will happen again in October. I encourage everyone to come and check that out. Maryland was also home to the USA Cycling Mountain Bike Championship, another nationally renowned event. And we've also focused on our resource-based industries in the state, including seafood and forestry, just looking for sustainable ways to grow and retain these industries. Again, working on that land preservation goal as well as economic development. Last but certainly not least, I always love to mention our Conservation Corps programs, which are engaging young people across the state and providing us an opportunity to train the next generation of workers so that we have a ready workforce that can continue to promote and move all of these important initiatives and strategies as outlined by the Smart Growth Subcabinet. So thank you again for the opportunity to present, and happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. We are so grateful and lucky to have you as one of our state agency partners, and we appreciate the collaboration and the good work from your agency. Don't think we have any questions at this point, as I understand it. So I think we're ready to move on to our next presenter. So thank you very much, Secretary Riccio. We appreciate it. We're going to move on to Secretary Joe Bartenfelder from the Department of Agriculture. Okay, are we fixing the audio? Do we have an audio issue with Joe?
He has been activated to unmute. He just needs to unmute.
Okay, so Secretary Bartenfelder, if you could unmute yourself, you will then be able to give your presentation.
About now.
Great, we can hear you.
Great, Wendy. It's good to join everybody. And as I was saying when I was in silence, you have a great architecture's rendering there of the Salisbury Animal Health Lab. And even though there's mountains that are rendered there in the background, I just want to assure everybody there are no mountains on the Eastern Shore. So with that.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. With that being said, after I became secretary, one of the biggest fears that agriculture had on the shore was something called high path avian influenza, HPAI. And we did tabletop exercises each and every year. And you can go to the next slide. We did tabletop exercises every year, and we avoided the plague up until this year. February 23rd was the first case, and in fact, it was at a poultry facility that was actually in Delaware. However, the control area overlapped into Maryland, so that's why it affected us. So along with the Delaware Department of Agriculture, USDA, and our folks, we had our emergency operations center set up in Dover. There were 6 cases total, and 2 were in Cecil County in Maryland and 1 in Queen Anne's County in Maryland. We were able to control that, and we did a swift response to make sure it was controlled and contained. Next slide. One of the things that Governor Hogan emphasized after taking office was coordination between all the state agencies. In other words, he talked about breaking down the silos. And this was one time that was an absolute perfect example of how all the different agencies work together in collaboration, bring the results that were needed. We worked with MDE, DNR, Maryland Environmental Service, MDOT, Department of Health, and it really produced the results that were needed. This HPAI is highly contagious and devastating to the poultry industry. One thing that we had to work on, and the health department was there for that, was to reassure the public that it was not a threat to the human health. So next slide. Go back to our Salisbury Animal Health Lab. This was the architect's rendering of it. It had been on our books for years, and from everybody who I talked to at the Maryland Department of Agriculture, it was as much of a dream as they ever thought that it could be reality. Because it was always in the planning stages, but never in the building stages. So worked on convincing Governor Hogan to make sure that money was included in the capital budget. And it was on one of his trips, and I don't recall whether it was MML or MECO in the first year in office, that he agreed to stop at our old lab. Next slide. So what you see here, we're not to the demolition yet. There we go. What you see here is a actual picture of the old Salisbury Animal Health Lab, and inside the lab, the cramped and outdated working conditions that existed there. And one of the things that the governor seen when we did our visit was, filing cabinets that were being worked on out of bathrooms, cramped conditions. And his first reaction was to look at me and said, wow, you didn't exaggerate any how bad this was. I to know. And one of the things that HPAI emphasizes is the importance of being able to work with an up-to-date lab, because it not only serves the poultry industry of the eastern shore of Maryland, but all of Delmarva, including Delaware and Virginia. Next slide. Now we get to the demolition. So there's a demolition. I was hoping we had a little, we had a nice video that should have been included of the excavator running. And as anybody who's ever worked with the governor knows, he loves excavators. So it didn't take nearly as long to get that lab down as it did to get the money in the budget to build it. But we were moving in the right direction. The old lab was coming down and construction was about to start on the new lab. Next slide. And there's some actual pictures of construction of the new lab taking place, which includes not only more spacious labs to work out of to do testing, not only on poultry, but on all livestock and other animals that would be brought in there, but also classrooms and meeting rooms and things like that for the public. And the location of the lab is also very convenient to University of Maryland, Salisbury University, and University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Next slide. There we have it on June 11th, 2022, the grand opening for the Maryland Department of Agriculture Animal Health Lab in Salisbury, which a dream turned into reality for a lot of folks who worked there. We had people who were retired for years who came back just for that ribbon cutting and opening. And I'm pleased and honored to be able to be a part of that. And it wouldn't have happened without not only the commitment of Governor Hogan, but also the support and everything of our legislators who really saw the need for it and came through when it counted. So thank you all very much. And if there's anything that you have a question about, glad to handle it or get you the right answer.
I think we do have two questions. I'm not able to see them. So John or Chuck, if you could share the questions. Oh, wait a second. I may have just.
I had shared them to you.
Okay. Okay. First question. How much is the Department of Agriculture working on reducing the effect of farm animal excrement on carbon emissions?
Oh, we're working very hard on that. Hans Schmidt, our Assistant Secretary for Resource Conservation, and through the efforts of the legislature and also Governor Hogan, we've been able to hire nearly 60 new resource conservation people to help farmers throughout the state be able to put more practices on the ground, so to speak. And we were able to address a lot of stuff early on, which was always called low-hanging fruit. And now we're going back for it's called our second bite of the apple.
Great, great. Well, Secretary Bartenfelder, thank you very much for your presentation. We all understand how important agriculture is to our state. We appreciate you sharing this important update and really talking about the responsiveness and collaboration that we have among the subcabinet and the administration. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Wendy. And a lot of people don't realize, but it's the largest industry in the States.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, very important. And we thank you for your leadership and we thank you for your collaboration.
Thank you.
And now we'll move on to the Maryland Energy Administration and our favorite director, Mary Tung, who's going to give us some update on some really important stuff out of the Energy Administration.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. It's really hard to compete with DNR and their cute critters and, you know, trails and swing sets and whatnot. But what we do at MEA touches everybody's lives absolutely every second of the day.
Can we, I think we have a screen issue. Can we?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think Eric is gonna be running the screen, and
Okay.
so we'll wait for the presentation to come up. I think he's getting close.
Although I'll say, Director Tung, you talk about the critters and trails, but I mean, you do have a lot of money, so there is something to be said for that, right?
We have a lot of money, and no offense to our friends at the Department of Environment. When I was over there and I'd call somebody, they wouldn't call me back because that was more regulatory on their end.
Right.
They didn't have too many cute critters either. We couldn't compete with DNR when I was over there either. But now that I'm at MEA, people do call me back, so, so that's a good thing.
Okay, so I think we have a screen share issue. Can John and or Chuck help us out with that?
Eric, it looks like your PowerPoint is in the lower tray. Can you might have it on the wrong screen. I don't know how many monitors you have, but you're probably sharing the wrong screen.
What I'm seeing is a great picture of his son with some cannons.
I was gonna say, that's a cute little guy.
Little
Yeah,
guy.
Eric, if
My
you
son
could,
was much younger than he is now.
Eric, if you could move that presenter view up a little bit. If you can move that window maybe to cover over the cannon so I can see the whole thing, because you're going to need to swap.
Maximize the.
He's going to need to swap monitors.
Right.
He may almost be there. Nope, looks like there's a PowerPoint running, but it's just not. Okay, now go to slideshow. There you go.
There we go.
Thank you, John, for your help, and thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Much better to be looking at the slides than at me. We often talk about the role we have. We're about 40 so people, 41, 42 pins at MEA. But we have a really big function that we do. Our only function really is to promote affordable, reliable, and cleaner energy for the benefit of all Marylanders. If you look at the news every day, you'll see what a difficult job that is. And we do it with 40-some people. This slide kind of gives a little bit of how we work that. We are the state energy office, and in addition to a lot of our other duties, a lot of states just have a state energy office. We have multiple functions. This is one of them where we provide energy policy and programs to the governor, the legislature, other agencies in the state, and to the public. We also manage the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, and that funding primarily comes from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a, for lack of a better word, a carbon cap and trade program that is, I think we're up to 10 states, 11 states now, I think 11 states. We're hoping Pennsylvania joins us soon. So that does a lot of funding for the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, which also gets funding from other sources, offshore wind developers, some merger funds, and that kind of thing. So we have to manage it, the CEF, we call it, and the CEF is, has certain purpose and certain ways we have to spend the money. We can't just spend it on anything we want. We have to spend it in a way that is either told to us by the legislature and also PSC and other sources of funding. We also represent the governor and the state of Maryland before the Public Service Commission. We usually don't get involved in rate cases because we really don't have the expertise to do that, but we do get involved in a lot of other policy type things. Offshore wind is a big one, energy efficiency, the Empower program for Maryland, we're involved in that. A lot of work groups for making the grid a little bit better than it is now, hopefully a lot better than it is now, and so forth. So we're very active with the staff and the Public Service Commission itself. And we're also involved and responsible for being point for energy security and assurance. So we have some priorities that are coming up. Energy costs, obviously, it's big in the news. It's big for us as well. It's really easy, and we hear a lot. Well, it's only adding 20 cents to your monthly bill, but that 20 cents added to other costs that are on your bill for particularly people who are in energy poverty, and those numbers are going up a lot right now, both with the high costs of living and for the high cost of energy. It's something we have to pay even more attention to now than we have in the past. There's a lot of private sector stakeholders that we work with. We help secure federal funding. And this is one for geological survey for underground geology surrounding Lehigh Cement Company. This is one thing we're working on. And this is for carbon capture. This is so that companies and generators that produce carbon dioxide, we can recapture that carbon dioxide so it doesn't go into the atmosphere. And these are all studies that the federal government is interested in, so through the Department of Energy, and we're helping on the policy side of that. I had mentioned energy poverty. That all leads to equity, and some populations are more impacted by high energy costs and quite frankly, sometimes the lack of energy as others. And this is something that we've been doing for years before it became popular to do so. It's something we've always, and I will talk about that a little bit later, some of the things that we've been doing historically and new stuff we've been doing on achieving energy equity. I had mentioned the energy assurance in Maryland. Two major parts of that is the liquid fuel plan, which we've completed, and energy security plan, which is under development. And this is in association with the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. The liquid fuel plan came about because of the Colonial Pipeline shutdown earlier. And we've had two of those since I've been in office. And the latest one created the most havoc to Maryland and to other places. So we realized the plan we had was adequate. It got us through, but we learned a lot, and we've updated the plan to include everything we've learned during the most recent Colonial Pipeline shutdown. We also want to start working on transforming markets for clean energy and energy efficiency by deploying targeted programs that reduce the need for long-term financial support. Our energy efficiency program in Maryland, Empower, was jump-started using financing to get things moving, and that's a good thing, but the debt is now very, very high, so we're working on that. Clean energy is another one that, as it comes online, we have to have transmission lines to handle it, and that gets very expensive. So we look at transmission projects and other projects to try to, again, make energy as affordable and reliable as possible. And again, I had mentioned federal funding earlier, and investment from the IIJA and BIL legislation, including formula grants and partnering with other organizations and entities on competitive grants, which is actually one thing that the Lehigh Cement project was doing. That's part of those funds. The next slide, please. So bolstering Maryland's resilience to energy disruption is one of the big things we do. We work with the Public Service Commission and also with the emergency management folks to work on this. We work with other agencies as well, but those are the two major ones. This project was actually some photographs from Montgomery County, and both projects were worked on previously by Mr. Kaufman, who's currently handling our slides. He was poached fair and square from Montgomery County. Sorry about that, but we have him and we're happy we have him. So the solar project was at their public safety building, which is what's on the photo there. And the day we were there visiting, they were actually pumping electrons back to the grid. And that's backed up with a combined heat and power project. I think 2 or 3 of those generators, which operate at very high efficiency. And there's also electric vehicle chargers in there. This fosters resiliency and critical infrastructure, which I think everybody would admit a public safety building is resilient communities. We also work with hospitals, community centers, and that type of thing. We've invested over $20 million, I believe is what that should be, since the beginning of the Governor Hogan's administration, just on resilience, and those programs continue to grow. One thing that we've been working with, we're very proud of on the solar front is, and resilience, is parks. We're working with the Department of Natural Resources to try to get resilience built into a lot of their parks. A lot of these facilities are out in the middle of nowhere, which is where we want them, so that you can go on hiking trails and see, you know, cute critters. But they also are more subject to power shutdowns and that kind of thing. So we want those to be a lot more resilient. DNR approached us actually quite some time ago, even prior to the Hogan administration. And we've now got an active program on that. So that's one that we're really happy about. And I believe the DNR is happy about that one as well. One of our partnerships is with Frostburg University, Western Maryland. Frostburg has a really good resiliency program, and we've worked with them on various projects. And I'd like to talk about a couple of them here. There is a $100,000 planning grant under Resilient Maryland for feasibility and pre-construction program. And then that's been followed up with a $750,000 capital award to advance the projects that were identified in the planning phase. So our resilience program, a lot of times when a project's being thought about by a municipality or a local jurisdiction, or in this case, university, the upfront cost of the feasibility and so forth just will keep them from doing it. So we offered a grant that will allow these entities to plan their project, find out how much it's going to cost, and then they're ready to go into the capital phase of it. And so we wanted to help with both of those. We don't want people to not put projects in just because the upfront costs are too much just to do the planning alone. And planning is an upfront cost. It's really hard to justify that because you don't have a building or a solar array or something to show for it. So that's one thing that we've done. And quite a few of our grantees, this program's been in existence, I think we're starting our third year now. And quite a few of the grantees for the planning portion of it have come back for the capital portion as well. So this particular project is going to be a microgrid for part of campus, and microgrid is a term that is in the eye of the beholder, but it could be a solar battery backup. It could be, as the Montgomery County one was, combined heat and power system. All of this is kind of combined to be able to island off the facility in the case of a power outage. As I mentioned, there's fuel cells is another, in addition to combined heat and power. This safeguards students. In the case of Frostburg, it safeguards students and communities from energy disruption. We've worked with community centers. We've worked with religious institutions that can serve as a basis for a microgrid in their community. In this case, it contributes to campus sustainability goals. That's always a good thing, and provides opportunities that are included in energy curriculum. So when we work with universities, there's always an educational component into that. It's not our requirement, but for the university and for us as part of our public education part of what we do, this is something that we view very highly, that students can get in and see how it's built, how it's put together, what happens while it's running. So we have another project with Frostburg State University. This one is huge. This announcement came out during the Maryland Municipal League meeting. It was a big day for us. This project, there's another one I'm going to talk about in a minute. Frostburg, we're partnering with Frostburg State University to look at a feasibility study for combining a small modular nuclear reactor on an existing coal plant facility. So the coal plant would shut down, and the energy generation would then start coming from a small modular reactor. So a little bit about the small modular reactors. There's two major companies right now. There's several in the world that are working on these. 2 in the United States have been already approved by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. These are very small reactors compared to the large ones you're used to. This is not a Calvert Cliffs or Peach Bottom. This is a much smaller reactor. On the slide, you'll see this silvery ball. They're about the size of billiard balls. In the center, you'll see a very small silverish, grayish, that ball, and that is actually the nuclear fuel. The black around it are multiple layers of carbon. So these modules, these are these small billiard ball shaped balls, are then put together in this reactor, and they cannot go supercritical. The carbon that is normally used in a larger reactor to control the reaction is already present. It's already surrounding the nuclear core. So basically, they're designed to come up to the temperature they need to drive the turbine to make the power. But the safety of this is really amazing. And these reactors are much, much smaller than the larger nuclear reactors. And they also are flexible. You could have one reactor, you could have 2, you have 3. In this case, they're 80 megawatts compared to a normal nuclear reactor, which is usually around 1,000 megawatts, so much smaller. And they can be added or taken away depending on the needs. A lot of this particular unit, a lot of this would be underground in a safe, very thick containment kind of structure underground. However, again, there's nowhere for these things to go. It's not like you're going to have a meltdown. It's not like nuclear fuel is going to leak out and become liquid and seep into groundwater. They're all contained in these nice little ball structures. There's another another company. Right now, they're working in Idaho, I believe, completely underwater and underground. Again, if there is any kind of a leak, it would go into this massive pool of water, and they can't go. They have a little different structure, but again, they can't go super nuclear. You're not going to have meltdowns and that kind of thing. So these are very, very, nothing's completely safe, but the fuel for this, the spent fuel, is stored on site dry for a while, and so you're not going to have a Fukushima where you have spent fuel rods sitting in water, and then the water can't keep them cool. You don't have to worry about this with any of this. This will ultimately go to a low-level dump because there's really nowhere for it to leach or leak to, because there's nothing to leak or leach out. So they're looking at this with a coal plant. So they're in the process of, and Frostburg is leading the way on this, try to identify the best way to go about this. Right now, this is the first one in the planning stages in the United States, and we're just really hoping that we're going to be able to see this forward. And again, Frostburg is really playing a big role. A lot of folks don't realize what heavy hitters they are out there, but they've got a really good program in sustainability. And without nuclear, we're not going to be able to support the amount of solar and wind that we want to put on the grid. If you look at what's been happening in Texas, unfortunately, the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine, and so we need to have this, what we call base generation, to continue to provide electrons, even in the case of wind not blowing or nighttime and so forth. The next one is the next slide. We're going to the other side of the state. This is Somerset County. There was a pipeline put into Somerset County. Somerset had no natural gas in the county. This seems to go against the state's goals of trying to not have fossil fuels. But natural gas in an area that has been operating on diesel, wood chips, and whatnot, this was a huge plus for Somerset County to reduce air pollution and their carbon footprint. And again, this will allow a little bit more penetration from some of the renewables that are going in out there as well, that some of the base load, maybe not generation per se, but when you're using natural gas to heat your facility or whatever, then you're not taking that off the grid. So this resources came from the Maryland Gas Expansion Fund, which was formed from the merger of Alta Gas and Washington Gas. This pipeline allowed the retrofit of two major state institutions, the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, which was using home heating oil and diesel, and also the Eastern Correctional Institution, which was using wood chips. So it allowed those two to hook up to natural gas. ECI is still in process. We anticipate that'll come online in a couple months. UMES is currently online with gas. This allowed for 66% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, 99% reduction in particulates, enables other businesses and residents to obtain access to natural gas, which bolsters economic development in an area that really needs it. We worked really hard with a lot of different agencies on this. MDE was probably our biggest partner, as well as the Maryland Environmental Service, MES. Those are our two major partnerships on this project. There were others, but those were the two major ones. The next slide shows another new way to try to tackle greenhouse gases, carbon sequestration, capture and sequestration utilization. This is the one I mentioned. We'll be working with Lehigh Cement, which produces a lot of carbon dioxide. I don't want to go through this in too many details. There's one in the upper right-hand corner shows some ways that you can sequester carbon dioxide so that it will not get back into our atmosphere. These underground storage are so deep that the carbon dioxide actually turns to liquid. In some cases, it will actually solidify in the geology of the area, the kind of rock that's there. Other times, it can be actually used in products that will sequester this carbon dioxide. And there are cases of different kinds of cement that actually become harder with the carbon dioxide added in. So there's a lot of complaints about this, that perhaps if it goes into these underground areas that they can leach out. Norway and other European countries have been doing this for a long time, and these the graphs that you see on both the lower right and the middle are expanding plumes of carbon dioxide in underground facilities in Europe that keep expanding proportional to the amount of carbon dioxide that's being added to them. So it's not leaking out, it's staying where it's supposed to be. And this has been carried out over several years, and they're not seeing any signs of cracks, breaks, leakage. Again, it's liquid, and it's way under any water tables or anything like that. So this is in its very early stages. In this country, it's really almost a research stage, but there have been some successful projects going on in the country, unlike what you hear, that this is purely experimental. It's not purely experimental. As I mentioned, it's been going strong, particularly Norway. It's a big country on this for some time in the rest of the world. So we'll move to some of our other programs. The next slide. Low to moderate income energy efficiency is something I had said earlier. We've been doing this for some time. This is a program we've had in place for quite some time, I think over 10 years. As you notice, over 65 million has been invested since fiscal year 2016. Funds go to local governments, community organizations, and so forth to upgrade homes of LMI or low and moderate income Marylanders and buildings that benefit them. This is one program like and I'll talk about the manufacturing in a minute. It's really hard to get folks in low and moderate income communities to engage with us. We can't say we're from the government, we're here to help you. They don't believe that. So we work with organizations and governments that do work with them, that they do trust, local government organizations, community organizations and whatnot. Habitat for Humanity is one we work with, Civic Works and so forth. There's a lot of these organizations that work in a community. They know their community much better than we would. So we give the grants to those, and then they report back on what they did. Low-income solar was added in fiscal year 22, and it's continuing in 23, and we're hoping next year as well. 17 million went in for fiscal year 23, which is the biggest amount ever in the history of this program. Over 14,000 buildings have been retrofitted, and it is a nationally recognized program. We did get an award this past year for this program. So it's one we're very proud of. I love it. We've gone to site visits, and to see the difference in the community is really pretty amazing. Streetlight and outdoor lighting efficiency. This is a much newer program. Again, we work with local communities and owner-operated lights. The problem with street lights, a lot of people don't realize, is the utilities own some of them, the local municipalities and counties own some. Sometimes people don't know who owns what. This builds on a grant from DOE that we received several years back to provide direct technical assistance and to assess the need. This can lead to 50 to 70% reduction in energy consumption, while improving community aesthetics and really lowering the maintenance costs. You don't have to change light bulbs all the time and that kind of thing. 1.6 million in fiscal year 22 awards to replace over 6,200 fixtures. And that program's continuing and continues to grow. So it's one we're really proud of. Decarbonizing public schools. This is one that I had not heard of at all when I first started MEA. The energy market has changed. The energy field has changed drastically. And when somebody came to me and said, "Oh, we're going to put some money into net zero schools," I'm looking at them like, okay, that's going to cost an arm and a leg, and I don't know who's going to afford it. Well, it actually doesn't cost an arm and a leg now, because the materials have come down. The building methods of building these buildings have come down. So the first one is pictured here, the Wild Lake Middle School in Howard County. The data has come in for a couple years on that. It is actually net zero. They use, of course, LED bulbs. They have solar. The Lieutenant Governor and I and a couple other folks climbed on the roof of this building to see the arrays that are on the roof. They also have arrays elsewhere on the grounds. They have a geothermal system under their football field. Lighting is set so that a lot of natural lighting comes into the building so that they don't have to turn the lights on. They have designated plugs for different things. So your computer can't go out, so that stays in a plug that shuts off, or that does not shut off. A lot of the plugs do shut off. It's really an amazing building to go through. If any of you have an opportunity, I'm sure someone from the school district would be happy to. It's a comfortable building. I mean, you wouldn't know by walking through that it's net zero. And the public education. The kids get, there's kiosks throughout where they can look, and I believe that's going to be happening in the state center as well, with some of the upgrades they're doing, where there's kiosks and you can look at the energy usage and what's coming through solar and what's coming through the geothermal. And so it's really an interesting project. I could spend the whole time just talking about this project. But we have some other ones. There's two that have been completed in Baltimore City. There were two schools built on a very similar plan. So I put two of them in at once. I visited those for the groundbreaking. They approached it a little bit differently, but a lot of the components are the same. They did a lot of solar, battery backup, and geothermal as well. And again, there's the kids can get in and check out what's happening on the screen, find out, and these are middle schools, find out what's going on, and it's part of their curriculum. So we've got 3 schools operating in Maryland right now, and we're looking at placing schools in each of the counties, in addition to anything else that we can find to do. So the decarbonization, there's another part of it where we're assisting school districts to look at their energy needs, because again, it's a resource that they may not have, especially the smaller districts are cash strapped and they don't have the folks to do that. So we're working with them on efficiency measures, both in new construction and existing buildings. So there's on this slide, there's 7 awards that for efficiency and energy management, and 2 for net zero planning. So we're really happy about that program. And we're working with the, what's the name of the, it's the Interagency Commission on School Construction. So that's a partnership that we've built with them. That seems to be a very good working relationship, and we'll be going forward with them as we get further and further into this program. Clean transportation is very important, and it's probably one of our more publicized programs. What you see on the screen is the Lieutenant Governor and I went to the dedication at Giant in Hanover. If you notice our MEA symbol on the front fender of the truck, these are electric delivery trucks. They have 2 of them. We're hoping, and they're hoping to expand that fleet. There's a lot of other companies that are interested in doing this, not just these step vans, but larger up to Class 8 vehicles. So there have been multiple pieces of legislation, such as the Clean Cars Act, that promote technology neutral transportation, decarbonization. Clean cars is a little bit of a misnomer because we're getting into trucks now. The medium heavy duty zero emission vehicle MOU was signed, I think 2 years ago, establishing a 100% target for by 2050 for medium and heavy duty sales by 2050. And we've deployed over 25 million in rebates, grants, and tax credits to incentivize electric and alternative fuel vehicles during the Hogan administration. The Clean Fuels Incentive Program, this includes electric, but it also includes other forms of alternative fuels, compressed natural gas, and propane and so forth. The propane program, a lot of school buses do propane. It's much cheaper per unit, but really drastically reduces greenhouse gases, particulates, nitrogens, and sulfurs. Here's a couple of the awardees from the last round and the Clean Fuels and stuff. Some of these are really, really interesting. 50 compressed natural gas step vans, school buses, Cisco, I mentioned Class 8. There's 10 Class 8 electric tractor and trailer vehicles. That's really, we're excited about that. Propane delivery trucks. One of my favorites, I mean, who would have ever thought, electric concrete mixer trucks. Those are a really odd vehicle. I used to work in an emergency room many years ago, and concrete mixer trucks, they're very, very difficult to drive, difficult to control, and accidents with those are pretty serious. So having the electric motor, and I'd love to talk to these folks, I haven't had an opportunity, but it's probably a much better fit for these trucks that will require high torque engines to turn the concrete. So that was something that was a surprise to us, and so they're one of our awardees. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one comes out. Next. We were starting to get a lot of, like the concrete mixer truck, which did fit into a current program, but we're getting a lot of asks from different folks that came in and say, hey, we got this idea, what about this, what about that, can you give us money? And it's an audit issue, it's an issue with trying to be fair to everybody, it's an issue with making sure that the CEF dollars are spent wisely. So I asked my staff to come up with a new program, an innovation type of program. So we came up with the the open innovation program, and folks can come in with their ideas that don't fit into our regular programming, and they can come in. It can be either existing technology that is known, but used in a different way. It could just be something that isn't a part of our suite of programs. People can think outside the box a little bit on this one, as long as it has environmental, air quality improvements in energy efficiency, renewable energy, all of those things that we do at our agency. They can apply for this grant. And we had quite a few applicants this year, quite a few grantees, some really cool things. Electric fishing vessel pilot, who would have thought, electric fishing boats. Evergreen Heritage Center will be in Western Maryland, gives the public an opportunity to come in and learn about energy efficiency, renewable energy. There's not a lot of that in Western Maryland, although, as I mentioned earlier, Frostburg's working on it as well. The first one, the Regional Manufacturing Institute of Maryland, as I said, sometimes the manufacturers are making their widgets or they're doing their stuff, and energy efficiency is not top in their mind, although they know that it could have a bottom line impact. So the Regional Manufacturing Institute has been really good partners, and they're working on energy and sustainability support. And I know they work with Commerce, they work with the Department of Environment, water savings, electric savings, plugging something as simple as plugging leaks and hydraulics and whatnot. But there's a program that they're doing right now at Trayport Atlantic, and new manufacturing companies coming in, and it's basically going to be designed around energy efficiency and whatnot, and the Regional Manufacturing Institute is working on that. They're also working on offshore wind and getting the supply chain up to speed on energy efficiency, renewables, and whatnot as well. So they've been good partners. And Maryland Environmental Services, they applied, actually, we've got a lot of partnerships with them. But we just recently gave them a grant for Eastern Shore landfill gas to energy. Landfill gas is, a technology that's been used, but once it gets to a certain stage, there's not enough methane being given off to sustain a generator. So they've got some ideas on how to capture that without having to blow it off in the atmosphere. So that one's going to be really interesting. It's a new type of engine that might be usable for much lower amounts of gas, natural gas and methane that's coming off the landfills. So one thing that we wanted to look at, and this came into effect before COVID, so COVID hit, so this has been an interesting report to put together, but how many jobs are we creating in the clean energy market? And this is bandied about by folks on all sides of the issue. Are there good jobs? Are they as good paying as traditional energy jobs and whatnot? We wanted to get a handle on that. So we worked with the National Association of State Energy Officers, which MEA is a member of, and they helped us produce this report. We were getting a lot of reports from DOE for Mid-Atlantic and whatnot, but Maryland's a very small state. We have our own unique, every state's unique, but we're very small. We wanted to get what the impact on Maryland itself was. So this is on our website. It's something you can click. I believe you can click right into it from our homepage. So we can provide those links, I believe. Yeah, the link's not in this report, but we can provide the link for that. It's very interesting. And yes, there are jobs. There was a trail off during COVID, but they're coming roaring back, and they will, I have no doubt, will be continuing. So that's my report. We do have the Strategic Energy Investment Fund reports. The links are there. This gives you a very detailed overview of what we're spending the money on and why. There's narrative. Volume 1 has a lot of the narrative. Volume 2 has the actual listing of grantees. And oh, by the way, this is our 30th anniversary year. 30 years of clean energy partnerships, and we can't function without the partnerships. I know that's part of what this is all about, is what the partnerships are. I know this is a lot to swallow at one single sitting, but there's a lot of good stuff going on, and most of you are very much not aware of what we're doing at MEA now. Now you know. So please let us know if you have any questions. We can answer them either here or offline. Because I did throw a lot at you. So are there any questions?
First of all, you do have a few questions, and I would just like to say that is a lot of really good information. And I can tell you firsthand from working with a number of municipalities how grateful they are when we are able to connect them with MEA and get them on energy savings and some of the other opportunities and grants that are available through your agency. Your staff has been great to work with, great to collaborate with, and we really are seeing a difference in many of our local governments because of that partnership. So I just want to thank you firsthand for that.
Thank you.
We do have a number of questions.
Okay.
We'll start. The first question is, I know you said you work with nonprofits and other organizations, but when trying to work with lower income and disenfranchised communities, are there any specific examples you can provide on how your agency has effectively achieved a goal without partnering with other organizations? Any techniques to build trust of the community besides working with nonprofits or others? And the only thing, and one of the things I'll say about that is I know firsthand that you all have been able to go into certain communities and partner with local governments, which has really made a big difference.
Yes.
I'll let you answer the question.
It's hard for us to, we're a state agency, so it's hard for us to get into a community and know its exact needs. The last thing that anybody wants is for a state agency to come into a community and say, this is what you need. And they're like, no, it's really not what we need. So we have built partnerships, one-on-one partnerships with organizations and with, like you said, local governments. And we have really formed relationships with individuals in those communities as well. I don't have a silver bullet for that other than just it evolves over time. The trust takes a while to build up. But again, we're trying to serve the entire state, and we can't form a relationship with one party and just go with them, because even though we know them and we know they're going to do a good job and whatnot, so we have to make it fair and make it available to everybody. And a lot of times the smaller, particularly the smaller organizations, sometimes this is down to a single church in a community. They can work with the community much more effectively. That doesn't mean we're not in there working as well. I mean, Baltimore City, I could give a whole host, Macbeth's and several houses of worship, and like I said, Civics Works and Youth Works, and there's a lot of organizations, Healthy Homes, that know the community really well, much better than we ever could. And so for us to come in again and say we're the state and we know what your needs are is just kind of hubris, and I wouldn't want to do that.
Right.
So we usually do work through either local governments or through organizations, because that, quite frankly, is the most effective way to get into the communities to get the need settled. I will say that I remember we were walking around a community in Easton that was transformed. There was about 3 different organizations that come in and transform several blocks in Easton. And I talked to one of the folks that was sitting on his front porch watching all this, and he was telling me how he's interacting with the workers and how much of a change in the community it was. And it was really heartening to talk to him. We've talked to homeowners, Habitat for Humanity homes, the homeowners and whatnot. But again, for them to know to come to us and to fill out an application to get things done, it's just not the best way to do it. So normally we work through the organizations that can take over like whole city blocks and transform them, like
Right.
Habitat for Humanity is known to do. So
Right. I'm going to try to hit 2 more questions, and then we'll send the others. There are a couple other questions to your staff, and you can follow up directly just in the interest of time.
okay.
The one is, how does the cost of converting coal-fired plants and nuclear waste disposal compare to wind and solar fields, or wind turbines and solar fields?
That's a good question, and that's one thing that Frostburg is looking at. What is the cost? What are the costs going to be for conversion? We don't even know that because it's never been done before. So I can't really even answer that. I have no idea. And wind is kind of difficult to. The solar, we kind of know it's been around for a while, but it's so intermittent. That's what we're trying to get around, is the intermittency. And we've got vast programs that are putting in renewables, and we've been supporting offshore wind at huge amounts, millions. I mean, I know at least 44 million since I've been in office for business development, workforce development, whatnot for offshore wind. But we can't deny that sometimes wind doesn't blow. Lots, the sun isn't out during the nighttime and whatnot. So we've got to have that base generation. So the cost, it gets more complicated because, first of all, offshore wind in this country is a new industry. The costs continue to come down. The way the states have done bidding for these offshore wind lease areas have been different depending on each state. And the industry is just now starting. We're getting the supply chain going and whatnot. So those costs will continue to come down. So given the cost right now, it's going to be difficult. And if you want to look at cost, you want to look at how much carbon is made building these things. I mean,
Right.
We're going to have the same problem with any generation, whether it be a coal plant or a nuclear plant or a wind plant. We're going to have the same issues.
Right.
Cost comparison is almost impossible to give, but that's why we're doing the study right now, at least on this one project. And as projects start going in nationwide, we'll get a better handle on that. But right now, there's just no way. We don't have the data at all.
So to be fair to say that a lot of the concerns or questions with regard to the nuclear really would be is part of what you're addressing when you do the study, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Very
And the
good.
safety is handled through the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Obviously, we're not going to get behind something that we think is unsafe. But that safety issues, we don't have the expertise for that. That's the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. These companies have been doing this for at least 10 years in the process of getting these things approved. And they're going to be in the process as they're being built on site as well. I should say installed. They'll be built elsewhere and then installed on site. NRC is going to be involved in all of that. We really don't. That's the federal government. We really don't have any say in any of that, because we don't have the expertise. So
Right.
Great question. It's something I hope that in a few years, maybe more than a few years, we'll be able to answer. But right now, we can't. The major thing right now is the intermittency. We need that base generation. Again, we want to keep the lights on. It's really important we keep the lights on. There's data centers that are going to those areas in Western Maryland in particular. And, we all like our cell phones. The data centers to support these are big energy hogs, and you need 24/7. You need backup systems. These things are going to go down real quick if we don't have constant energy supply.
Right.
So that's kind of that's the balance we're dealing with. We want clean, and we want resilient, and we want affordable, and we want something that's on 24/7, so whenever you turn your lights on, and the hospitals can keep their patients going and whatnot. So we've got that balance we're trying to do here.
Great. Well, thank you for being such a great partner, and thank you for sharing this information. I will just remind people that this has been recorded. It'll be on the planning's website. The PowerPoint presentations will also be on the PowerPoint websites. And if your questions were not addressed in the interest of time, we will be certain that somebody from planning and the relevant agency will be back in touch with you with answers to continue the dialogue. So thank you, Director Tung. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, and thank you for your kind words.
Yes, I think all of you can see that working together with these agencies, all of the state agencies, but really all of our local government partners over the last 7.5 years, I guess, we've really brought some real and lasting change to Maryland. And we've shown that with strong partnerships between the state government and all of our local leaders working together, we can get things done. And we can solve tough problems, and we can really ensure that we have changed Maryland for the better. And that certainly has been our goal since we've come into office. Now we're going to move to the open forum discussion, which is an opportunity to discuss local government issues relating to activities that affect smart growth, development, neighborhood conservation, and resource management. If you have any questions or if you have any comments, I think everyone has been unmuted. Participants have been unmuted, or if you would prefer to send your question in the chat. We do aim to respond. If we're not able to respond here today, we will certainly follow up.
Excuse me, Wendy, let me clarify. Only the Smart Growth Subcabinet representatives have been enabled.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. So the questions need to be put in the chat if we have questions. So that would mean that our representative members from the 13 agencies are unmuted and prepared to respond to any questions that might be presented. Okay, I think on my end, I don't see any. John and Chuck, are there any on your end?
There was just one more for Director Tung, which we will just send out later.
Okay, very good. Well, once again, I want to thank Secretary McCord, Secretary Hadaway-Riccio, Secretary Bartenfelder, and Director Tung for their presentations and sharing this important information. And I really want to thank everybody who participated in this. As you can see, we are forming partnerships, and we do value the opportunity to collaborate, not just among ourselves at the state, but certainly with each of our local government partners. Thanks also to staff for their good work in behind the scenes in making this happen. At this point in time, this will conclude our Smart Growth Subcabinet Public Forum. thank you to everyone.